very guy who was helping Joe Biden get the $8 million. The $8 million Joe Biden had used, the motive for Joe Biden to disclose classified information, to retain classified information, which he definitely knew was against the law. When you get named special counsel, what's that guy do? He destroys the evidence.
You must have understood the impact of your decision to go beyond the specifics of a particular document, to go to the very general, to your own personal, prejudicial, subjective opinion of the president, one you knew would be amplified by his political opponent, one you knew that would influence a political campaign. You had to understand that.
Special counsel Robert Hur gets grilled by both sides of the aisle. This is a juicy one you don't want to miss. I'm Rob on the right. Let's go take a look.
Mr. Hur, why'd he do it? Why did Joe Biden, in your words, willfully retain and disclose classified materials? I mean, he knew the law. Been in office like 50 years. 5 decades in the United States Senate, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, 8 years as vice president. He got briefed every day as vice president. He's been in the Situation Room. In fact, you know he knew the rules because you said so on page 226. President Biden was deeply familiar with the measures taken to safeguard classified documents. And Joe Biden told us he knew the rules. Mr. Armstrong said this earlier. Joe Biden was deeply familiar with it. You're exactly right, because he told us when Jack Smith goes after President Trump, Joe Biden says, how could this happen? What data was in those documents that could compromise sources and methods? It's irresponsible. So Joe Biden knew the rules. You know he knew the rules. And Joe Biden told us he knew the rules. So, Mr. Hur, why did he break them?
Congressman, the conclusion as to exactly why the president did what he did is not one that we explicitly address in the report. The report explains my decision to the Attorney General that no criminal charges were warranted in this manner.
I think you did tell us. I think you told us, Mr. Hur. Page 231, you said this. President Biden had strong motivations. That's a key word. We're getting to motive now. President Biden had strong motivations to ignore the proper procedures for safeguarding the classified information in his notebooks. Why did he have strong motivations? Because, next word, because he decided months before leaving office to write a book. To write a book, that was his motive. He knew the rules, he broke them because he was writing a book. And you further say, and he began meeting with the ghostwriter while he was still vice president. There's the motive. Mr. Hur, how much did President Biden get paid for his book?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure if that information appears in the report.
It sure does. There's a dollar amount in there. You remember?
I don't, it may be $8 million if that's
$8 million. Joe Biden had 8 million reasons to break the rules. Took classified information and shared it with the guy who was writing the book. That's why he did. He knew the rules, but he broke them for $8 million in a book advance. But you know what? It wasn't just the money. Joe Biden, here's this page 231, very next page. Joe Biden, in your report, Joe Biden viewed his notebooks as an irreplaceable, contemporaneous record of the most important moments of his vice presidency. He'd written this all down for the book, for the $8 million. And the next thing you say in your report is, quote, such a record would buttress his legacy as a world leader. You know what this is? It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just $8 million. It was also his ego. Pride and money is why he knowingly violated the rules. The oldest motives in the book, pride and money. You agree with that, Mr. Hur? You wrote it in your report.
That language, and it does appear in the report, and we did identify evidence supporting those assessments.
You also had another interesting statement in your report. You said Joe Biden, I want to make sure I get this right, viewed himself as a man of presidential timber. Remember that statement, Mr. Hur?
I believe that does appear in the report, at least in the executive summary.
I think this is interesting, because here's the scary part. Page 200. I said this earlier in my opening statement. Page 200, Joe Biden, this is a quote, Joe Biden risked serious damage to America's national security when he shared information with his ghostwriter. Shared it with his ghostwriter, the guy who was helping Joe Biden get $8 million. And oh, by the way, Mr. Hur, What did that ghostwriter do with the information Joe Biden shared with him on his laptop? What did he do after you were named special counsel?
Chairman, if you're referring to the audio recordings that Mr. Zwanitzer created of his conversations with
Exactly
Mr. Biden,
what I'm referring to.
he slid, if I remember correctly, he slid those files into his recycle bin on his computer.
Tried to destroy the evidence, didn't he?
Correct.
The very guy who was helping Joe Biden get the $8 million, Joe Biden had used the motive for Joe Biden to disclose classified information, to retain classified information, which he definitely knew was against the law. When you get named special counsel, what's that guy do? He destroys the evidence. That's the key takeaway in my mind. That's the key takeaway. I yield back.
To give you a little bit of context, Robert Hur was a lawyer that was appointed as a U.S. attorney for the District of Maryland by the Trump administration. Having said all that, one has to wonder why he's getting grilled by both sides. I think it becomes apparent by the end of this video. Let's continue to watch.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida. 5 minutes.
February 8th, the White House. Question, Mr. President, why did you share classified information with your ghostwriter? The President, I did not share classified information. I did not share it. I guarantee I did not. That's not true, is it, Mr. Hur?
That is inconsistent with the findings based on the evidence in my report.
Yeah, so it's a lie, is just what regular people would say, right? Yeah, all right. So the next one. And all the stuff that was in my home was in filing cabinets that were either locked or able to be locked. That wasn't true either, was it?
That was inconsistent with the findings of our investigation.
Another lie, people might say, right? Because what you put in your report was among the places Mr. Biden's lawyers found classified documents in the garage was a damaged open box. So here's what I'm understanding, right? As Mr. Armstrong laid out, you find in your report that the elements of a federal criminal violation are met, but then you apply this senile cooperator theory that because Joe Biden cooperated and the elevator doesn't go to the top floor, you don't think you get a conviction. And I actually think you get to the right answer in that. I don't think Biden should have been charged, don't think Trump should have been charged. But under the senile cooperator theory, isn't it frustrating that Biden continues to go out and lie about the basic facts of the report that lay out a federal criminal violation?
Congressman, I need to disagree with at least one thing that you said, which is that I found that all of the elements were met. One of the elements of the relevant mishandling statute is the intent element, and what my report reflects is my judgment that based on the evidence, I would not be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury that that intent element had been met.
Right, but the reason you have that doubt is the senile cooperator theory. The fact that Joe Biden is so inept in responding that you can't prove the intent, which again, I don't quibble with that conclusion, but it's frustrating to be like, oh, well, this guy's not getting treated the same way as Trump because the elevator's not going to the top floor, so we can't prove intent. While at the same time, Biden goes out there at the White House and says, well, you know, he just blatantly lies. And what I'm trying to figure out is whether or not Biden's lying because he's still so senile, he hasn't read your report, or whether it's a little craftier and a little more devious and perhaps a little more intentional than we might otherwise think. So I also want to go to this Biden Penn Center. Like, did it give concern to you that the Biden Penn Center, where all this classified stuff was being mishandled, was being floated by foreign governments?
Congressman, we were concerned with getting to the bottom of all of the classified documents that were recovered during the course of our...
Yeah, but what bothers me is that the money that was paying for the place where the documents were being inappropriately held, it was the Chinese and it was other foreign countries. Did that play into your analysis? Did you look into the $1 billion in foreign funding sources at the Biden Center at UPenn, for example?
Congressman, we conducted a thorough, impartial, and fair investigation, and we were very, very concerned with getting to the bottom of all the relevant questions relating to the recovered documents.
Did you look into the fact that the Chinese were floating the place where this guy was keeping the documents unsecure? Yes or no?
Congressman, to the extent that we identified evidence that was relevant and significant to our investigation, we put it in our report.
Okay, well, it seemed relevant to me, maybe not to you. Another thing that seemed relevant to me is this ghostwriter, right? So the ghostwriter purposefully deletes this evidence that seems to be show culpability of Biden's crimes, and you don't charge him. Why did you not charge the ghostwriter with obstructing justice and deleting evidence?
Well, for a number of reasons that are laid out in the report, but in brief, Congressman, yes, when we interviewed the ghostwriter, he did tell us, and I'm trying to get the exact language, that one of the things on his mind, one of the things he was aware of, was that I had been appointed special counsel and was conducting an investigation.
Right, so he didn't, just so everybody knows, the ghostwriter didn't delete the recordings just as a matter of happenstance. Ghostwriter has recordings of Biden making admissions of crimes. He then learns that you've been appointed. He then deletes the information that is the evidence, and you don't charge him.
That is reflected in the report, and one of the reasons...
Like, what does somebody have to do to get charged with obstruction of justice by you? If like deleting the evidence of crimes doesn't count, what would meet the standard?
So, Congressman, as we state in the relevant chapter of the report, one of the things that Mr. Zwanitzer did not delete was transcripts of the recordings that he had created that included inculpatory evidence relating to Mr. Biden.
Oh, so if you destroy some evidence but not other evidence, that somehow absolves you of the evidence you destroy? Like, here's what I see. Zwanniger should have been charged, wasn't. Biden and Trump should have been treated equally. They weren't. And that is the double standard that I think a lot of Americans are concerned about. I see my time's expired. I yield back.
If you ask my opinion, this is where the rubber meets the road. If I were a betting man, I would say that this guy did a backdoor deal. But then again, he couldn't walk away empty-handed because the Republicans would demand something out of it. So he settled for talking trash on Biden's mental acuity. In my opinion, that doesn't really matter because both sides already know the score in that game. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think charges should be brought up on Joe? Or do you think the whole document case for both Trump and Biden should just be thrown out of court in general? Let me know down in the comments.
A gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. I want to ask you about some of the differences between the facts involving President Biden and President Trump. But before I do, I want to refer back to your opening statement in which you said that you did not disparage the president in your report. But of course, you did disparage the president. You disparaged him in terms you had to know would have a maximal political impact. You understood your report would be public, right?
I understood, based on comments that the Attorney General had made, that he had committed to make as much of my report public as consistent with legal policy and legal requirements.
And you could have chosen just to comment on the president's particular recall vis-a-vis a document or a set of documents, but you decided to go further and make a generalized statement about his memory, didn't you?
Congressman, I could have written my report theoretically in a way that omitted references to the president's memory, but that would have been an incomplete and improper report in that it did not reflect my analysis
you could have
and the explanation of my decision.
You could have written your report
General.
with comments about his specific recollection as to documents or a set of documents, but you chose a general pejorative reference to the president. You understood when you made that decision, didn't you, Mr. Herr, that you would ignite a political firestorm with that language, didn't you?
Congressman, politics played no part whatsoever in my investigative steps.
But you understood
decision,
nevertheless,
the words
didn't you,
that I put in my report.
Mr. Herr, you cannot tell me you're so naive as to think your words would not have created a political firestorm. You understood that, didn't you, when you wrote those words, when you decided to include those words, when you decided to go beyond specific references to documents? You understood how they would be manipulated by my colleagues here on the GOP side of the aisle and by President Trump. You understood that, did you not?
Congressman, what I understood is the regulations that govern my conduct as special counsel.
And those regulations
required me to write a confidential report for the Attorney General,
which you knew would not be confidential.
My decision, and that is what I did, Congressman. I followed the rules.
You knew it would not be confidential.
I followed them.
You knew it would not be confidential, didn't you?
Sir, the regulations required me to write a confidential report explaining my decision to the Attorney General.
Which you knew would be released.
It was up to the Attorney General to determine
you understood it would be released, did you not?
Would be released consistent with DOJ policy.
You understood it would be released. You understood it would be released.
I understood from the Attorney General's public comments that he would make as much of my report public as he could, consistent with legal requirements and DOJ policy.
And you also understand DOJ policy that you are to take care not to prejudice the interests of the subject of an investigation, right?
That is generally one of the interests that DOJ policy requires that prosecutors respect.
And it was your obligation to follow that policy in this report, was it not?
It was also my obligation to write a confidential report for the Attorney General explaining completely my decision.
What you did write was deeply prejudicial to the interests of the president. You say it wasn't political, and yet you must have understood. You must have understood the impact of your words. You must have understood the impact of your decision to go beyond the specifics of a particular document, to go to the very general, to your own personal, prejudicial, subjective opinion of the president. one you knew would be amplified by his political opponent, one you knew that would influence a political campaign. You had to understand that. And you did it anyway. And let me just go to some of the differences here between the president's conduct and Mr. Trump's. In the superseding indictment, on page 3, it says that Mr. Trump suggested that his attorney falsely represent to the FBI and grand jury that he did not have documents called for by the grand jury subpoena. You didn't find anything like that with respect to Mr. Biden, did you?
Congressman, I do not have the Trump indictment in front of me, but I need to address something that you said in your prior question. What you are suggesting is that I needed to provide a different version of my report that would be fit for public release. That is nowhere in the rules. I was to prepare a confidential report that was comprehensive and thorough of an explanation.
What is in the
of my position
rules,
as the Attorney
Mr.
General.
Herr, what is in the rules is you don't gratuitously do things to prejudice the subject of an investigation when you're declining to prosecute. You don't gratuitously add language that you know will be useful in a political campaign. You were not born yesterday. You understood exactly what you were doing. It was a choice. You certainly didn't have to include that language. You could have said, vis-a-vis the documents that were found at the university, the president did not recall. There is nothing more common. You know this, I know this. There is nothing more common with a witness of any age when asked about events that are years old to say, I do not recall. Indeed, they're instructed by their attorney to do that if they have any question about it. You understood that. You made a choice. That was a political choice. It was the wrong choice. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I don't know about you, but Adam Schiff always creeps me out. But seriously, this line of reasoning makes no sense whatsoever. The idea that the DOJ is not going to go after Biden concerning these documents is fully predicated on the decline of his mental health. Robert Hur literally had to write about it in his report in order for the plan to work.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Arizona, did special counsel wish to respond to that final question?
Yes, Congressman, what you are suggesting is that I shape, sanitize, omit portions of my reasoning and explanation to the Attorney General for political reasons.
No, I suggest that you not shape your report for political reasons, which is what you
time is
did.
the
That did not
witness'
happen,
response.
Congressman. That did not happen.
Mr. Hur, during your one-year investigation, did you have communications with the White House and the White House counsel in particular?
Yes.
I think you had I got 5 letters that they and they communicated with you regarding your investigation. Is that accurate?
We received a number of letters from White House counsel's office and as well as the president's personal counsel.
Right. They're either special counsel or personal counsel. I see who signed the letters. And did the White House get the report before the report was made public?
We did provide a draft of the report to the White House counsel's office and members of the president's personal counsel team for their review.
No, I understand. And did the White House then, once they got the report before it went public, did the White House try to weigh in with your investigation on elements of that report and frankly get the report changed?
They did request certain edits and changes to the draft report.
Yeah, I see that in the February 5th letter. Did they only correspond with you?
I'm sorry, Congressman, are you asking if they corresponded with anyone else on my team?
Once you gave the report to the White House,
Yes.
they saw changes. I have one letter here that's addressed to you on February 5th, and they said, we're pleased that after more of a year of investigating, you've determined, they respond to the report. And then they disagree with they asked for you to change some of the things you had in your report, namely the fact that the president's memory was not very good. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but I also have 2 other letters. One on February 7th to Merrick Garland, where they raise the same concern, and then on February 12th, where they go to the DAG, Bradley Weinsheimer. You familiar with those?
I am familiar with those letters. Bradley Weinsheimer is an assistant or associate deputy attorney general.
Right, Associate DAG, the ADAG, right?
Yes.
And Merrick Garland, of course, is the Attorney General. So
Yes,
you're
he
familiar
is.
with the fact that they went over your head?
They were certainly entitled to write whatever letters they wished to Mr. Weinsheimer and to the attorney general.
I just find that interesting. The White House they're communicating with you throughout this one-year investigation, and then the White House says, "Oh, we're going to go to the principal's office, and we're going to talk about Mr. Hur's report." Do you find that interesting?
As I said, they were free to correspond with whomever in the federal government they wished to correspond with. I did engage in numerous communications with them during the course of the investigation, and as is reflected in the special counsel regulations, the Attorney General did provide oversight of my investigation.
Understand. Mr. Hurd, we got 3 more we're going to do, and then we're going to take votes, and then we'll just have a couple more after that. So I'm going to start with the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Yield to the chairman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Hurd, are you opposed to the U.S. Congress having access to the audio tapes of the people you interviewed during your investigation?
Chairman, I am not in a position to articulate an opinion one way or the other. That is not really up to me. I'm a former employee of the Department of Justice. I would refer you to the White House and DOJ leadership.
You're an accomplished lawyer. Is there any reason why we shouldn't, why the United States Congress shouldn't have access to the same information you had access to, and that was the basis of your decision?
Chairman, it is not for me to opine on what materials.
Well, the Justice Department released the transcripts the day of the hearing. It'd been nice if we'd had them at a better time for the committee to prepare for our questioning for you. They released them today. The White House and the Justice Department released them today. It'd be nice if we actually had the audio tapes too. Again, is there any reason why you can see why the American people and their representatives in the United States Congress should not have access to those tapes?
Chairman, what I can tell you is that my assessment that went into my conclusions that I described in my report was based not solely on the transcript. It was based on all of the evidence, including the audio recordings.
Great point, and that's where I was going. So this was valuable evidence for you as the special counsel named to investigate this issue, valuable evidence for you to reach your conclusion, and the statements you put in your report. And all I'm asking is, shouldn't the United States Congress have access to that same information?
Chairman, again, it is not for me to weigh into what information Congress should or should not have, but what I will tell you is that the audio recordings were part of the evidence, of course, that I considered in coming to my conclusions.
Between witnesses destroying evidence and the White House doing an end run on this guy, it's clear that Robert Hur has no agency or control over this situation. It's fully apparent that he's just a pawn of the DOJ's. I mean, he doesn't even work there anymore. Nowadays, the House is filled with moral decay. For instance, Jim Jordan calls out this guy for lying to Congress. Seriously, you got to check it out. It's crazy what people will say. And if not, see you around the campus.